On the morning of August 15, 1951, a baker named Roch Briand did what he had done every day for years. He opened his shop before sunrise, pulled that morning's loaves from the oven, and set them out for the town of Pont-Saint-Esprit to buy. He had no way of knowing that by nightfall his name would be tied to one of the strangest medical mysteries of the 20th century, and that the bread in his own hands would ruin him, whether or not it was ever truly to blame. Within 72 hours, more than 250 people in this small French town would be seized by convulsions, terrifying hallucinations, and a violence they could not explain or control. Some would believe they could fly. Some would turn violent against the people they loved. And 7 decades later, historians, chemists, and at least one investigative journalist still cannot agree on what actually happened here: a natural poison, a cover-up, or something closer to a weapon. This is the story of le Pain Maudit, the cursed bread, and the question that still haunts it when an entire town loses its mind at once. Who does it blame, and what happens to the man left holding the truth? To understand what happened in Pont-Saint-Esprit, you have to understand the summer that came before it. France in 1951 was still rebuilding. Bread was still rationed by a national grain authority, and bakers in regions like Gard, where Pont-Saint-Esprit sits on the banks of the Rhône, had no real choice in where their flour came from. It arrived from whichever mill the government assigned, and a baker simply used what he was given. Roch Briand's flour that week came through a mill in nearby Saint-Martin-la-Rivière, run by a man named Maurice Maillet. That summer had been unusually wet, and a wet summer is exactly the condition under which a certain fungus thrives on rye, one that French villages had not seen cause serious harm since 1816. In the weeks before the outbreak in Pont-Saint-Esprit, smaller, quieter versions of the same sickness had already appeared in nearby villages supplied by the same mill, Iserac-Laval, Saint-Romain, Goudargues. Rashes, stomach pain, vomiting. Nobody connected the dots yet. Nobody thought a loaf of bread could do what was about to happen in Pont-Saint-Esprit itself. Because here is the quiet human tragedy underneath all of it. Nobody in this story was reckless. Briand baked bread the way his father had. The miller ground the grain he was legally required to accept. The families of Pont-Saint-Esprit did what French families had done for generations. They bought bread from their local baker and fed it to their children. The horror of this case isn't that someone was careless. It's that an entire system of ordinary trust between farmer-miller-baker and family turned without warning into a delivery mechanism for madness. On the Saturday night of August 15th, the phones in Pont-Saint-Esprit's doctor's offices began to ring. Heartburn, stomach cramps, fever chills. At first, the town's physicians assumed it was something ordinary, a bad batch of meat perhaps moving through a few unlucky households. It was a reasonable first guess. It was also wrong. By Monday, roughly 70 homes across the town had effectively become sick rooms. And as the doctors compared notes, one detail kept surfacing: nearly every patient had eaten bread from the same bakery, Roch Briand's. All 8 bakeries in Pont-Saint-Esprit were shut down as a precaution while investigators tried to understand what they were dealing with. That night, the first man died in convulsions. What followed was not simple illness. It was something closer to the town's grip on reality coming loose all at once. Survivors described neighbors screaming that invisible enemies were hunting them through the streets. One eyewitness, a young man named Paul Pagès, would later recall watching a patient leap from a hospital window convinced he had turned into a dragonfly. A small boy, gripped by the same delirium, tried to strangle his own mother. Gendarmes went door to door collecting fragments of bread to send for analysis in Marseille, treating loaves of bread of all things as evidence in what was starting to look like a mass poisoning. And this is where the case becomes a genuine medical mystery, because the investigators didn't land on an answer. Immediately, they had to eliminate one theory after another. Mercury poisoning from a grain fungicide sold under the name Pain Maudit was considered and set aside. Nitrogen trichloride, an illegal flour bleaching chemical, was considered and set aside. 2. The pattern of illness didn't fit either one cleanly. It was only in September of 1951 that scientists writing in the British Medical Journal settled on an official verdict: ergot. A fungus that grows naturally on rye in wet weather, the same organism responsible for a medieval affliction once called St. Anthony's fire, chemically related as it happens to LSD. The father of LSD himself, the chemist Albert Hofmann, traveled to investigate the case in person and came away convinced that ergotism was the most likely explanation available at the time. It should have ended there. It didn't. Not everyone accepted the ergot explanation, and one of the loudest voices against it had every reason to want it disproven. Pierre Jacob, president of France's National Millers Union, publicly rejected the theory, arguing that ergot had always existed in French flour without causing anything like this. To prove his point, he reportedly offered to eat a piece of the contaminated bread himself in front of a panel of experts. Whether he actually went through with it was never recorded for certain. Roch Briand, meanwhile, was eventually cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. The courts found no negligence on his part. He had simply baked with the flour the state had assigned him. But being cleared and being ruined turned out to be two very different things. The baker, who had opened his shop every morning for years, ended his life penniless and disgraced a man legally innocent and socially destroyed because a town needed somewhere to put its fear. And his name was the one thing everyone could agree on. For decades, that was where the story rested: an unlucky baker, a wet summer, an old fungus with a new name. Then, in 2009, investigative journalist Hank P. Albarelli Jr. published a book built on declassified American intelligence documents. His claim was that the Pont-Saint-Esprit poisoning wasn't an accident of nature at all, that it may have been connected to the CIA's Cold War-era MK Ultra program, testing LSD's potential as a weapon on an unsuspecting civilian population. Most historians remain skeptical, and in 2008, French historian Stephen Kaplan, after years poring over the original records for his book Pain Maudit, concluded that neither the ergot theory nor the CIA theory fully accounts for everything that happened that August, which leaves us more than 70 years later exactly where the town's own doctors stood on that first Saturday night, certain that something happened, and still not entirely certain what. Somewhere between a wet summer, a broken supply chain, and a Cold War experiment, nobody has ever proven a town went mad for a week and a baker paid for it with the rest of his life.